like, we were so young and we were so naive. We were scared to death.
And 14 years later,
we're
we're still here. Don't ask me how and why. How we're God's miracles. What can I say? And beautiful Jews like you. Okay, so I do have to apologize. I do have to, at 12 o'clock. I have an important Zoom today, so I don't have to get on. I could get on a few minutes later, but I so that works for you. Anyhow, so no, usually I'd wait a minute or two, maybe Val would come, but we'll start and okay. So we're up to chapter 51. Yeah, it's gonna, and this Tanya, it's gonna start on page 788. The text will start on 788. First, we'll give a brief introduction. 266 in the linear is it called a linear translation? Something like that. It's not linear. It's just the regular translation, not the lessons in Tanya. Bilingual edition. Okay. Yeah, because it's not. There's no explanations or commentary. It's just the translation.
Just the translation.
Good morning.
Good morning.
If it's too hot for anyone, let me know. I could lower the air a little. Oh, okay, fine. Or if it's too cold, let me know. I'll raise it. But okay. Yeah. Right. So if you remember last week, I told you that we're going to, next 3 weeks, we're going to talk about the Shekhinah. So you all intuitively know if you want to pray, which direction are you going to look to pray in a specific direction? Usually, for sure, the Amida, we look to pray to a certain direction. Which direction do we face?
East.
East. Well, here in the West, we face east. Yes. But the point is we face Jerusalem.
Yeah.
So if you're on the other side of the world, you face west, or you face north or south, depending on where you're located. Everyone knows this. Today, there's even apps that in the app or in the siddur, it's the north isn't the compass, it's Jerusalem is the compass. And it could figure out where you are and direct you to Jerusalem. It doesn't direct you towards east, because if I'm flying overseas, my sense, I remember when I was in Israel at the beginning, it was odd for me. Like I didn't realize that we weren't facing east. We were facing there, but we weren't facing east in the yeshiva where we were. I didn't have a phone then, so I didn't have my own compass to look. But if I would go now and have my phone, I wouldn't know which direction to face. I'd look east, and that would be incorrect. There's also in Maimonides writes that that in a prayer book that was written, a prayer book, but in the time of the Second Temple, it's already written that you face the temple when you pray. So the big question is, if sort of the premise of our faith is that God is infinite and he's the creator, he's not limited by anything, then how do we square that with facing a specific direction to face the Shekhinah, to face God, so to speak? Isn't God everywhere? And more importantly, how can we condense him? You know, first of all, how can an infinite God be in a specific place? But even if we will say he's in a specific place, how can the limit of that place, how can that contain an infinite God? By definition, there are two opposite things. So the reason we're getting into this conversation, and we're going to do a little wrap up. I don't know if you remember, but basically, up until chapter 25, the Alter Rebbe explained what it means to be a Beinoni, and how you can get your godly soul to be victorious over your animal soul in a long way and in a short way. Chapters 26, the Alter Rebbe introduced us to a question that some have, that sometimes I'm just not in the mood. I don't have the energy, or I'm too depressed too sad or too depressed or too down to get to work. So from chapters 26 through 34, the Alter Rebbe speaks about how to get over sadness and melancholy and reasons to be happy. Then in chapter 35, the Alter Rebbe starts a new section. The Alter Rebbe there quotes from the Zohar that the Shekhinah is present on the head of a person. We said that the body is like a candle. Candle is the wick and the wax or the oil, but the candle is not a candle until you light the fire. So you can have a human body. It's not a human being unless it's alive, unless there's a fire, there's a soul that's burning. If it's just the body, just a candle, that's not a candle. I mean, it is a candle. You call it a candle because you want to identify it, but that's not a candle. Candle's when it's lit. Right now, it's just a lump of wax with a wick. So in chapter 36 and 37 and on, the Alter Rebbe explains how do you get this soul, this fire, this divine spark to get onto your head through mitzvahs, through physical action-based mitzvahs, study of Torah, but primarily through mitzvahs. Yeah, and then, so that was 36, 37, yeah? 35, 36, 37 was how you need mitzvahs. But then we said, wait a second. So if the primary is action, what about intention? So for the next three chapters, 38 through 40, the Alter Rebbe discussed why it's important to have intention, even though action is primary, but it's important to have intention because remember, there's wings that make it soar higher. The wings are love and fear, the emotions, and that's why it's important to have intention also, even though if you have wings without a body, you also have nothing here. Yeah. And then chapter 41 through chapter 50, we discuss different types of love and fear, different types of intention, different types of feelings that a person has. But now the Alter Rebbe is going to circle back. We started this whole conversation because we said that in order for the Shekhinah, in order for the soul to rest on the body, it needs to come through physical action, through mitzvahs primarily, even more than Torah study. And the question is, why? And why specifically on the head? Again, if God is infinite, if God comes on me, isn't he my whole body, not just on my head? And why through physical mitzvahs? Torah studies compared to oil, because oil is compared to intellect, chachma, because chachma always rises above. Oil, no matter what you mix it with, will always separate and rise above. And so it would seem if you're trying to give fuel to a fire, Torah study would be a little more appropriate than physical action. Yep. So this is really a general question, theological question that we have to understand. And we've addressed this a number of times in Tanya, but here the Alter Rebbe is going to take it apart a little bit. If you remember, we spoke about two no, before we get there, just to, obviously, we must say that there are two types, that we're dealing with two separate types of, not types, we're dealing with two aspects of godliness. You know, we know there are verses that say that God is everywhere. We know that for sure. We also know there are plenty of teachings that tell us that God is in a specific place. For example, in the temple. It also says when there are 10 people sitting together studying Torah, the Shekhinah is present, right? It says when a husband and wife get married and live according to Torah, the Shekhinah is present, which means Shekhinah is present there and not somewhere else, or there more than somewhere else. But that's not infinite. That's putting limits. That's finitude. At the same time, we know that God is everywhere, and that's the sort of the premise of Judaism, is that God is everywhere. and God fills the worlds, fills the heavens and the earth. God is everywhere. So how do we fix this contradiction? Well, obviously, it can't be a contradiction. Because if it's a contradiction, then it doesn't work. So if we're going to accept that both of these types of verses and teachings come from the Torah, then they must be talking about two different scenarios or two different aspects. It can't be talking about the same thing. You can't have on the one hand something that's infinite and at the same time something that's in a specific place, physical place, because that's not infinite, right? So we discussed many times that there is two ways God manifests in the world, or two ways the way we experience godliness. One is mimale kol almin, which means fills the world. And then we have sovev kol almin, surrounds the world, encompasses all the worlds. Mimale kol almin, fills the worlds, is the way that God's presence is felt in specific things. So if one day you wake up and you realize, you know what? That flower outside, yesterday, there was nothing that was green. Today it's a beautiful color. That can't be an accident. There must be a creator that's behind this magnificent world. You see, not with your physical eyes, but you've just seen God in the flower, right? Then one day you see a rollover crash. The car flips over 15 times and someone walks out of the car with a few scratches. There you saw God again. Would you say it's the same God or the same level of godliness or the same attentiveness of God that was in the flower as in the rollover crash? Or would you say maybe that you saw more, you saw God's hand more here than there? What about when you see a child being born?
You think it can put limitations?
Not limitations. The question is, is God more apparent, or do you feel that God's presence is more felt in one place versus the other? I'm not asking you for reality. I can't expect you to know the reality. I'm asking you for your perception, for our perception. I think generally speaking, we would say that we do perceive God different in a human being versus an animal versus a plant versus an inanimate object. You feel God different on Yom Kippur versus a regular day. You feel God different when you're in a hospital for a baby being born, or in a hospital, God forbid, for a baby that's dying, right? You feel God differently in all of those scenarios. This is when you're encountering God's manifestation in the world in a way that he encloses himself, he invests himself in the world. And now he looks very different because you're seeing him through the prism of the world. So seeing God through a flower is very different than seeing God through a human being. But then you have God the way he's infinite everywhere. And there, when you recognize that God is everywhere, then you realize he's not just in the flower, he's in the air, in the oxygen, in the space around the flower too, just as much as he's in the flower. And he's in me just as much as he's in the flower, and he's in you just as much as he's in me. And there's no differentiation. There, it's almost like God is there as if he's on his own. Imagine you're a distinguished tenured professor and you walk into a kindergarten classroom. Okay? As long as your mouth is quiet and as long as you're just thinking on your own, yeah, there is no relationship between you and the class. The kids have no clue who you are. They look at you maybe even a little strange. What are you doing in our classroom? They may even stop noticing you after a while because you're not relevant to them. But you really came to observe and to distill some of your deep knowledge and try to give it over to kindergarten kids. Yeah. So then an hour later, you open your mouth and you start talking in a childish way. I don't mean a childish way, an immature, saying in childish words, in kindergarten grade level speech. You start to speak to them about things that relate to their lives. Now suddenly you're present, you're important. Okay? Where are you more? Imagine you're the professor Where are you more you? It's the same you that's talking to them versus sitting in the classroom observing them when they're totally clueless that you're there even. Same person, right? But where are you more felt as you versus you trying to lower yourself to the children? When you're sitting alone quietly, you're in your own thoughts. You may be observing, but really you're observing you're in your own mind. If you right now started speaking what you're thinking, the kids would have no clue what you're talking about. You're observing, you're in your own mind, you're 1,000 miles away from them. But then you choose to engage with them. Now it's the same you, it's your same mind, but you're not investing your whole mind into them. You're not immaturing your whole mind. You're just taking your mature mind and trying to channel a little ray, a little shine, a little ray of the light of your mind, channel it to the kindergarten kids. Yeah. So imagine, obviously, God's not limited in that way, in the way you are. But imagine you have God himself the way before he created the world, even if he created the world the way he's there by himself. God is everywhere equally. He's not felt one place more than the other. He's equally not felt everywhere. Just like we don't realize him, in Atzilus, they don't realize him. The angels don't realize him. But because in Atzilus, because the angels are older than us, they're more mature than us, they know he exists. And therefore, they're constantly looking for him, but they can never find him. Because he's the creator, he's alone. But then God decided to create a world. That's an investment. He chose to interact with the world. So now we're interacting with God. Is that God? Yes, it's God. But is it God the way God is for himself, or is it God the way he chooses to manifest in the world? Again, because we're giving physical metaphors, and because we think in physical ways, so automatically the image in your head is going to be a physical God. Obviously, we have to be abstract about that, but it's okay. Just for the sake of understanding this idea, don't get carried away with the fact that if you're caught up in a physical image, even though it's obviously. So we have God and we have the Shekhinah. Shekhinah means resting, not resting like dwelling. Yeah? When someone comes in, if you get neighbors, that's a Shachin. That's someone who came to dwell, to live next to you. Yes, Shekhinah means to invest, to embody yourself in this place, to dwell in this place. Before we do a mitzvah, Sephardim do it before almost every mitzvah. We do it once in the morning. We say a line and a half in Aramaic. We say it when we gather our tzitzis before the Baruch Shamar. It says, L'shem yichud, in order to unify Kudsha Brichu, which is the Holy One, blessed be He, Ushchinte, and His Shechina. We want to unify God and His Shechina, almost making it sound like it's two separate things. But the first thing we have to know is that there are two separate things. They're not separate. Again, you're not a different you when you're yourself or talking to the kindergarten kids. But you're going to describe it in two different ways. You're going to perceive it. In other words, the person outside is going to perceive it in two different ways. They're going to describe you. The child that will describe you sitting in the corner is going to describe you very differently than the child that's going to describe you talking to them. Give very different descriptions. Now you're going to have to try to convince the child that that same person that teaches adults in college or professors in college and looked like he was in a different world, that same person is the guy who spoke to you. But don't get fooled to think you got him because you understood something he said. You didn't get anything of him. You just got a little bit that he allowed you to glimpse at. Okay, let's start. Let's do a little before we get too carried away. Chapter 51, for further explanation of the words of the Yenuka mentioned earlier in chapter 35, where the Yenuka, this is from the Zohar, where the Yenuka was quoted as saying that the light of the Shekhinah which dwells upon a Jew needs oil, meaning good deeds. So it is necessary first to explain, so that one may understand a little, the concept of the Shekhinah, dwelling, that it dwelt in the Holy of Holies. And likewise, any other place where the Shekhinah dwells, what does this concept mean? What is meant when we say that a particular location is distinguished as being a place where the Shekhinah dwells rather than elsewhere? Surely the whole world is full of his glory and no place is void of him. Yeah, there was once the Talmud says there was or maybe it's in the Medrash, that there was once a non-Jew Gentile that came to Rabbi Meir and asked him that if you claim God is infinite, is so great, how could it be that the Torah describes God as speaking to Moses from between the keruvim, from between the poles of the ark, as if it was limited in a specific space? Isn't God everywhere? First of all, why did God have to speak through that space? But even worse, how could he speak through a certain space? So Reb Meir said, bring me a magnifying glass. So he brought him a magnifying glass and he put it in front of him. And he said, do you see me my actual size or do you see me bigger? I see you bigger. Then he said, bring me glass, whatever, a glass that you see smaller in. Yeah, I don't know what type of glass what you would call that type of glass. You turn the binoculars the other way. And he said, do I look the same size? Do I look like my size? He said, no, you look smaller. He said, you see, even a human being who's one size, a creation, can't change his size, can make it appear that he's different sizes. So you're going to question how God, who created the human being, can appear either infinite or from between the two sticks between the keruvim? What are you even trying to understand? But is it possible? Of course, even a human being can make that illusion, so to speak. So we know it says, we've discussed this earlier in Tanya, it says, from your flesh, you can see God. Which is not the literal meaning of the verse, but that's how it's interpreted. That basically, if you want to understand God, look at a human being. And if you were here last night, if you want to understand the human being, if you want to understand God, do you look at a human being?
Because we're all part of God.
Remember the verse we discussed? We are created in the image of God. So God has no image, right? So we can't see him. You want to see God, look at a human being. If a human being is created in the image of God, you look at a human being and you'll see, now, obviously, we're created in his image. It's like saying the kid looks like the father or the father looks like the kid, right? The kid looks like the father, not the other way around. So when we say, look at a human being and you'll see God, remember, you're looking at the product. So really, when we say we have hands, and we say, oh, if we have hands, God has hands, we're trying to imagine how can God's hands be like our hands? But remember, our hands are in God's image, not the other way around. Okay? So just remember that distinction, that difference. So if we want to understand how God works, what does it mean that God is present in the world, invested in the world, and yet at the same time surrounds the world? Look at a person, because a person is created in the image of God. We also have a soul, which everyone understands, regardless of what you think the soul is. Everyone understands that a human body with no life, no soul, is just flesh and bones, right? And every human being ends up that way. So what made you alive a minute before that? That you had a soul. We call it a soul, we call it a piece of God, call it whatever you want. It's something there that's invisible, that's not tangible, that gives life to the body, okay? Now, if I asked you, where is your soul? What would you say? Mm-hmm. Not really in a place. So if I asked you, where's the soul, what would you say? Where's your soul? If I wanted to identify where your soul is in your body, what would you say? Everywhere. A dead person has eyes. Could they see? No. They have ears. Can they hear? No. They have a mouth. Could they speak? No. Because the soul is missing. So the soul is speaking. The body, no. If a person closes his mouth, or if a person loses his mouth somehow, or born with the mouth closed, then he can't speak. But interestingly enough, he may still be able to express himself. Someone who can't see can still develop other intuitions that compensate for seeing. In other words, these powers are soul powers. The body is created in such a way that the power of sight that the soul has can be used with the eyes. If God put the power of sight in your toes, you wouldn't be able to see, right? If the soul of the sight was in the toes, it wouldn't see. So your first reaction to where is your soul would be everywhere. What do you mean? Every part of my body expresses part of my soul, right? At the same time, I think you may identify with, if someone asks you, who are you? And not your quality, who are you? Me, am I? Are you your body or your soul? No, you're your body, but who am I? My body or my soul? If you're your body, then who cares if you're alive or not? We understand there is a soul, whatever you want to envision it as, which is you. Is the you that you feel you are, does it have different parts? Do you feel like there's the I that sees and the I that feels and the I that speaks? Or you just feel like one me? Doesn't feel like a soul that, like we described, that has a part of it that's for vision and part of it that's for speech. It just seems like and where would you suggest this soul is primarily found? You would say it's primarily found in the brain. Why would you say it's primarily found in the brain? Or why would I say that? Maybe you're not going to say it. Why do you think I'm saying? First of all, does anyone disagree with that? Or does anyone feel differently? If you feel differently, let me make my point, then you can make a counterpoint, even though I already made a counterpoint that the soul is everywhere. But if you think about it, does your eye decide if it wants to see something and it knows it shouldn't to close it? Or does your brain decide to close the eye? When your ear hears things and it all goes to the brain, what happens if the leg, God forbid, is disconnected from the brain? The leg doesn't feel anything. By the way, I believe there are studies that, I don't know if there's a way to make this, if there's like, it's scientifically proven, but I think there are studies that people that have amputated limbs can still feel pain in those limbs. You've heard that?
I've heard that, yes.
Have you heard of that before?
Yes.
I don't know the details of these studies, but I've seen that before. In other words, the brain still possesses that potential for walking that existed in whatever leg is missing or in both legs that are missing. So that pain can still be felt even though there's no physical leg that's in pain, which is a wild thing to think about. And then again, someone who can't speak, the brain can figure out how to communicate with his hands. Now, if you cut off the legs, does the person still live? Yeah. Cut off the arms, does the person still live? Yeah. Cut off the brain, does the person still live? Well, I got nothing. So it seems like we would say the main part of the brain, or primarily the soul, is in the brain, in the head. So if you look at a human body, remember, we're trying to understand God a little bit. If you look at the human being, you see this dichotomy where the soul that animates the body, which is similar, as the Medrash says, to God animating the world, You see both elements. In the one hand, you say the soul is everywhere, the soul is in every limb equally, but at the same time, you understand that it seems like the soul isn't, right? All humans are created equal, but some humans are created more equal than others, or all animals are. It seems like the soul is everywhere in the body, but then in some places it's more than others. I think most people would say the soul is more in their eyes than in their toenails. And yet the soul is felt in the toenails too. So let's see. The bottom of the page, 788. However, the key to understand, does anyone want to ask, challenge, interject to what we said till now? Roger, you have a...
Okay.
I'm not pushing, I'm just,
No, no,
if
no,
there's
no,
something
no,
on your
no,
tip of your tongue.
I was thinking about the professor in the
Oh, okay.
kindergarten.
I knew
I've been there.
Okay.
Not kindergarten. I just never did kindergarten. But I was always there to demonstrate for teachers, not necessarily for kids, but for teachers, how to teach right. How do you teach your kids to write? Not the alphabet, but thoughts. Put thoughts on paper. I always found myself, it made no difference where I was, what country I was in. I was there and accepted by everyone in the room.
Sure.
Everyone. I mean, it wasn't the kids that were not looking at me, because they were the clay that I was
Right.
working.
Right.
And teachers just had to sit back and watch as I demonstrated things.
Yeah, but you're describing something different.
Yes, I am, but no, I'm not. I mean, I think there's crossovers.
There might be crossovers, but you...
There are crossovers here that have to be looked. But I found it to be, you know, I think it was an interesting.
You're not challenging anything. You're not.
No challenge. No, I'm not.
Not challenging. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I understood you correctly.
I found that to be
Informative. This is what to unpack. Amusing. Okay.
Than anything. And I've been very, very careful to keep my mouth closed.
Yeah, that might derail us, but it looked like you were holding yourself back, so I just wanted to make sure I wasn't. It says you're not allowed to put a muzzle on your animals when you're plowing the field when they're working. You're not allowed to put a muzzle on them. So also workers, if you have laborers in your field, you're not allowed to put a muzzle. They can't take things home.
Yeah.
But they have to be able to eat while they're working. You can't muzzle them. So you're sitting here. I can't, I can't.
Right.
I can ask for people to hold on, but sometimes it looks like
but
the words are coming out.
The other thing that it struck me when I was in 8th grade.
Could it wait? Or is it's relevant?
Second.
Okay, sure.
We'll take a second. 8th grade, we had a visit from Helen Keller.
Okay.
It was a big deal. The whole school, the whole middle school, so 6th, 7th, and 8th graders were in the auditorium, and we were all sitting waiting to see this person who's deaf and blind, who had an interpreter with her who interpreted in her hand because she couldn't see.
Right.
She couldn't see the sign language, so she had to do the interpreting in her hand. But when it became her turn to speak, she stood up, walked over to a podium as if she knew where she was going. No one was leading her, and she made a speech to us. And that had a permanent impression on my brain. And I don't know how to equate that to what you were saying, but that came back to me. But here's a woman who could do everything. She could do everything that she had to do.
Okay, we'll continue now.
Yeah.
But I see the relationship is seen at the bottom of 788. Yeah. However, the key to understanding the subject is to be found in the text, and from my flesh I see God. The Alter Rebbe understands these words literally. From what we see within ourselves, in our own soul and body, we can visualize the parallel on the spiritual level, in the divine emanations and the world in general. Again, you run the risk of making God physical, but just remember not to do that, or remember that this is all imaginary, and you're good. By way of analogy, the human soul pervades all 248 organs of the body, from head, the highest part of the body, to foot, the lowest part of the body. Nevertheless, so on the one hand, we see that the soul is in the entire body. Nevertheless, the soul's principal abode in a revealed form and dwelling place in an all-encompassing non-revealed form is in one's brain. And from the brain, the soul is diffused throughout all the organs. Moreover, each organ receives from the soul, a different form of life force and functional power, appropriate to it, according to its, in other words, the organ's composition and character. The eye receives from the soul a life force and ability to see. Power of sight accords with the smooth and translucent nature of the tissue of the eye. The ear receives from the soul a life force and ability to hear. The mouth to speak, the feet to walk. Each organ in the body, in accordance with its composition and character, receives its life force and ability from the soul, which dwells and becomes revealed initially in the brain. As we clearly sense how in the brain one is conscious of all that occurs within the 248 organs and of everything experienced by them. Because the brain is the nerve center and principal abode and source of the life force of the entire body. Yeah, so that we understand that the main resting place of the soul is in the brain, and at the same time, it is felt and it is dispersed to all the organs. Now, if we take this to its logical conclusion, we may start looking at the soul and imagining it a little different than we did till now. Till now, you imagined, if you had to draw a picture of the soul, you'd probably draw a flame, some light, some type of substance. Would you have ever thought to draw a puzzle of 248 different pieces? Or a Lego form of a human being with 248 bricks? I don't think anyone would draw a soul with 248 pieces. And yet we're saying that there's 248 unique abilities within the soul to do 248 different things in the body. And if the ability to see is unique to the eye, if the ability to see, if the same soul that's in the eye is in the foot, why can't the foot see? What's stopping the foot from seeing? So obviously, the conclusion that Rebbe is going to come to is that the soul, the way it is, itself is simple. Simple meaning it's one thing. It's like a flame, right? But potentially it has within it the ability to empower 248 distinct organs in the body. I'll give you an example. One minute. Okay. When you hear something amazing, what do? Or let me ask you a better question, because have you ever seen someone hear the greatest news in their life, the most extreme case, you saw someone hearing the most amazing thing in the world? What was their reaction? Think of the most... No, but what was their physical reaction? Jumping up, people faint. there isn't enough time for the brain to process it. There isn't enough time for the brain to process and tell the legs to jump up. That's a time where you almost see that the soul is just as it's, it's not just a walking ability of the soul that's in the legs. No, the soul itself is in the legs. By the way, how can you tell if someone is sad or happy? How do you know? How could you know?
Facial expressions.
Body language. It could be facial expressions. It could even be body posture. It could be the way you're walking, the way you're holding up your back, the way you're folding your arms. So all parts of your body can express what your soul is feeling in the inside. So there aren't two, it's not a soul that it's not a soul that's 248 different puzzle pieces. If that was the case, then the puzzle piece that's in the leg wouldn't be able to express the feelings in the heart and jump up at the same time. There'd have to be more coordination. Usually we see that the more it touches the person, the quicker the reaction time is, both for good and for bad. When something bad happens, the same thing. When a lion shows up, you either freeze or you run, right? That decision is made quicker than you can process and think, what should I do now? You may have trained to stand still and automatically you feel yourself running. Because the soul itself is everywhere, but at the same time, it's primarily in the brain. And that's why if you cut off the leg, God forbid, the person doesn't die, even though you cut off part of its soul, so to speak. So we have both of these sides to it, right? You have this in a seed. Yeah, when you plant a seed, and suddenly you have a trunk, you've got leaves, you've got fruit, you've got flowers. All of those were in the seed, but they weren't different puzzle pieces in the seed. It was the potential for all of those different things in the seed. The same thing with an idea. An idea comes into your head, and you know there's something there. Now you start unpacking it, and you build it into this beautiful creation. That whole creation was encapsulated in that idea that fell into your head. But it didn't look like what you made it to be. It wasn't expressed in that way, but it held in potential all of those things. So does the soul have the power? Soul speaks? No. Just like this part of the seed isn't going to be the fruit and this part isn't going to be the bark, but the bark is definitely inside the seed. The potential for the fruit is inside the seed, in the same seed. Yeah, let's see here, page 793, because we're gonna now the variation in receiving the functional powers and life force by the organs of the body from the soul, each organ receiving from the soul a life force and power in a different form, does not derive from the soul's essence and being. That we should say that its being in essence is divided into 248 different parts, which are enclosed in 248 locations. In other words, you're not going to say that the essence of the soul divides into each limb separately, according to the design of the various locations in the body of the body's organs. Because according to this, it would follow that the soul's essence and being is designed in a physical design and a likeness and structure similar to the structure of the body, God forbid. Just as the organs of the body have various shapes and forms, so according to this outlook are the functional powers, while still within the soul, different from each other in form. But again, we can't accept that the soul has a physical form to it. It is made up of 248 different parts. So what does it mean that the soul has 400, 248 different expressions, if it's not 248 different parts. Rather, is the soul entirely a single spiritual entity. It is a single entity, and it's a spiritual entity. As a single entity, its oneness is plain and uncompounded. And as a spiritual entity, its spirituality is in a form which is divested from any physical design and of any type of definition of physical space, measure, or limitation. The soul is free of all such dimensions by virtue of its intrinsic being and essence. In fact, the soul is so plain and free of all these that even when it is actually enclosed within the organs, they cannot affect any change in the soul. In the example that we gave before, even when the teacher actually starts talking to the kids, there's nothing the kids could say or do that's going to affect the teacher's mind, his own ideas. They may give him more information, but there's nothing they can do that can change who he is. Yeah, sorry.
I'm having a difficult time with this because when Jay was dying,
Yeah,
first he lost all physical ability to walk,
right,
then his ability to write,
right,
his ability to breathe,
right.
see, hear, and then his brain.
Right.
It's like his soul was leaving him. And I don't know how to explain it and give any explanation of how this is affecting me. It's like I'm thinking that his soul was trying to tell him something, but he couldn't talk to tell us what he was thinking because his ability to talk had been removed. The only thing he could do was shake his head, yes or no.
That's talking.
That's the only way he could
But
talk. We had to ask the right question, and we had to say it loud enough so he could hear.
Should we talk? Would you like to address this, or?
It's just like as you're watching him lay in that bed, in all of his functions, it's not just the walking and the talking, it's all his bodily functions are all
Right.
also shutting down.
Right.
And I keep wondering if there's something that we should have done differently, but maybe this is telling me that it was a way of letting the soul go
What?
without having.
Why do you think?
control.
Why is your mind going to maybe you should have done something differently? Why are you coming to that conclusion?
Because we never knew until the very end what it was that he was fighting.
Right.
And so if we had known earlier,
How would you have known earlier?
well, that was the problem. We basically entrusted the doctors
Right.
who
So,
were trained.
so you're not saying you could have done something differently. So you're not saying you could have done something differently because you couldn't have done something differently.
I guess we did everything we could. We
Sure.
got him into all of the best medical facilities we could. We got the best medical. There's always that thought in my mind that maybe we should have done something sooner, got him to the hospital sooner.
No.
Who knows?
Well, he was for months. He was in the hospital. He was under medical care. It wasn't you.
Yeah.
But maybe we could look at it in a different way.
Mhm.
and I don't know if now is the right time, but I think maybe now is the right time. You saw with your physical eyes that Jay wasn't really his body. Who was Jay? Was Jay the body, or was Jay the soul that was in the body? You saw that with your physical, you're literally describing something that you saw and experienced, where you saw how, although Jay was a body and the soul together for most of the time that you knew him, but you were able to witness that they were in a partnership together. They were two separate entities that were in a partnership together. And you saw them drifting apart, which means that anytime you think, I can't touch him anymore, I can't see him anymore, his body isn't here anymore, you should be able to catch yourself and remember, but that's not him.
It's the soul.
It's the soul. Now, in those moments, you felt very torn because you couldn't interact with the soul, because the soul during life interacts through the body, and his body was shutting down. So it looked like you lost all communication with him. But you lost communication because his body was turning off, not because you really lost communication with the soul. You just couldn't communicate with his body anymore. And since you're still in a body, that's the only way you know how to communicate is through a body. But you witnessed, your body witnessed that his soul, that Jay, let's forget the word soul for a minute. Jay wasn't his body. He was in a body. He perhaps manifested a body. Perhaps it was undiscernible. It was indiscernible, his soul from his body. But you got a glimpse that the death of the body can be totally separated from the soul and can have zero impact on the soul, perhaps even impact the other way, that now the soul isn't limited to the body anymore. You saw in those moments, the soul couldn't express itself because the body wasn't functioning, and the only way the soul knows how to express itself during lifetime is through the body. Now the soul isn't limited to that anymore. The soul can express himself however he wants. You may not be able to see it and feel it anymore, but you got a glimpse into something that, now, it's not going to make you stop crying. It's not going to make you stop missing that element of it. But if you think about it, every time these types of thoughts come into your mind, and you want to comfort yourself, you want to remind yourself that that's not real. That's the perception. And it's okay. It's the way God made us perceive. God commanded us to sit shiva, to mourn. God didn't tell us, get the reality and forget about this is nothing. This is just the body, the soul is the real thing. Don't cry, don't mourn, don't do anything. Yeah, God doesn't say that because you're a body. You have to experience life through the body. But if you didn't see that, you could be frozen. You could not be able to get out of it because
I'm attached to the physical.
If attached to the physical. And you'll never lose that totally, but you can rise above it as time goes on. The more you think about this part of it, the more you think about the soul as being a unique entity. And this is exactly what we're studying here. That although we experience our soul, I experience you through the ideas that you share, through your body language, through your expressions. That's how I experience you. But if I tried to say, to limit your soul, that's your soul, that would be like the kindergartner looking at this professor and saying, this professor, he's just the guy that's sharing ideas that I understand. And as a kindergartner, you wouldn't expect a kindergartner to see more than that because he's a kindergartner. And as a human being, we don't expect you to see more than that. But because God gave you a soul, we do expect you to be able to understand it, to be able to, again, it's not going to be your first thought. The first thought is going to be, I miss him. The first thought isn't going to be, I know he's here. The first thought is going to be, I miss him. And then when you turn on your brain and even your heart sometimes, you may be able to tap into that idea that there is a soul and that is still here. And maybe if I start speaking soul language, I can actually feel it a little more. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay, so,
I apologize if I want to apologize to you if I try to intellectualize something that's emotional. Obviously, I can't respond emotionally, and I didn't know if it was appropriate just to not ignore it, but let you you were expressing something real.
yeah.
I wanted to address it. I hope it was okay that I addressed it and
Yes.
didn't.
Yeah.
I'm not minimizing or diminishing or yeah.
So, in recent weeks.
You know what?
I have
We'll
had-
we'll pause here. Yeah,
I'm
and we'll
I'm
continue.
sorry.
No. We'll pause here. We still have a few minutes, but we're not
it's
going to
like
get
There's this element here, the spiritual.
sure.
That comes into play.
Yes,
And it kind of just brushed over.
glossed over.
But
Yeah.
there's probably something there that gives some kind of explanation or ideas of how that is part of this whole process.
Yeah, and it's very much related to the next few chapters that we're going to talk about, because we're going to talk about the next few chapters how the Shekhinah, God's presence, is found in the temple. We don't have a temple today. It's almost like death, right? Where you don't have the body, and yet we pray towards that direction because the soul is always there, right? So very much the next few chapters will play into this balance, this dance between physical and spiritual, and how we as physical people on the one hand need to understand God's everywhere, and at the same time we can perceive God in certain places more than others, in certain times more than others, even though God's not really somewhere more than somewhere else, but we perceive him more somewhere than somewhere else, and his presence is felt more in some places than in other places. That doesn't mean in reality he's more in one place than another place. So a person may feel more present when they're alive than when they aren't. That doesn't mean they're more present. That just means you feel them more. On the contrary, Jay's soul is more infinite now. He could be with you here. He could still be in the house.
Mm-hmm.
And he could travel with you even when he's tired. And even when his legs are hurting, because his legs aren't hurting anymore, he can go with you to class even when he's would otherwise be staying at home and going to sleep, right? So he's not limited to the physical anymore. Again, I don't mean to trivialize that, but we are trying to, on the one hand, disconnect the physical from the spiritual, but at the same time, bring them together. And this is a balance, this is a dance between recognizing two realities that are coexisting and happening at the same time, but it's only from our perception. From the soul's perception, nothing changed.
So recently, probably a month ago or so,